For our residents and loved ones, we are thrilled we can now give you the vaccine you deserve. Learn more at chicago.gov/COVIDvax.
The Patrick and Shirley Ryan Grant for Creativity, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship makes possible stories that enrich lives and inspire our communities. WTTW programming originates from the Renee Crown Public Media Center.
I hate the myth of Hemingway. It obscures the man.
His talent is stunning.
He went against the grain.
It's hard to imagine a writer who hasn't been influenced by him.
In order to have something new to write, he had to have something new to live.
And he fell in love quite a few times.
He's complex and deeply flawed, but there he is.
Hemingway, the man, is much more interesting than the myth.
Coming soon to WTTW.
Redemption. Revolution. Les Miserables. Celebrate the 25th anniversary of the ultimate people's musical, Les Miserables. 25th anniversary concert at the O2.
Sunday at 7 on WTTW. Tonight's presentation of Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Mollenhauer Progressive Philanthropic Fund in honor of Ida Mollenhauer, supporting quality journalism.
Good evening and welcome to the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. We'll be joined by our Week in Review guests in just a moment, but first some of today's top stories. Governor J.B. Pritzker announces a $10 million awareness campaign to overcome vaccine hesitancy and disinformation. This comes on the day that Northwestern Medicine announces it has detected the first case of the Brazil variant of COVID-19 in Illinois. Now, that variant is said to be more transmissible than other strains of COVID-19. The Chicago Department of Public Health says it is in touch with close contacts of the individual said to have it to encourage quarantine. Now, Pritzker today said misinformation of COVID has been, quote, rampant. He also says the state will begin shipping vaccines directly to community health providers to reach areas that have been the hardest hit by the virus.
Among our most important goals is to get the vaccines to black and brown people and to more remote areas of our state, to those who have too often been denied access to health care.
And state public health officials report 1,442 new cases of the coronavirus over the past 24 hours and 33 additional deaths. That takes the total number of cases confirmed to almost 1.2 million and the death toll to 20,700. The preliminary 7-day test positivity rate is 2.8%. And just under 132,000 vaccine doses were administered yesterday in the state, and that is a new daily record. Two defendants with long-time political connections plead not guilty in separate corruption cases today. Former Democratic State Representative Eddie Acevedo pled not guilty to tax evasion charges stemming from the ongoing federal investigation of Commonwealth Edison's lobbying practice. And a not guilty plea from Roberto Caldero. He's a political operative accused of offering bribes to now disgraced former 25th Ward Alderman Danny Solis. He also pled not guilty to charges of wire fraud and bribery. Charges against Caldero include an alleged scheme to steer a $1 billion Chicago Public Schools janitorial contract to an Ohio-based company. And now on to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Craig Dellamore of WBBM News Radio, Heather Sharon of WTTW News, Lourdes Duarte of WGN-TV News, and Rick Pearson of the Chicago Tribune. Let's get right into it. Heather Sharon, we mentioned the Brazil variant now reportedly found in Chicago. How concerned are public health officials about, how concerned are they about this variant?
I think they're very concerned. This is the third more transmissible variant to be discovered in Illinois. However, 69 cases of the United Kingdom variant have been discovered in Illinois. So that variant right now is much more prevalent in Illinois and a bigger source of concern. However, that's why you've not seen the governor and the mayor look at that low test positivity rate and start opening things up. The real concern is that these variants have taken root, and it's only a matter of time before they start pushing up the number of cases and the number of hospitalizations and eventually the number of deaths. So that's why you're seeing both the governor and the mayor take a cautious approach to reopening, even though all of the data is trending downward.
This happens as Cook County residents are now signing up for the 110,000 available slots at the United Center to get the vaccine. Lourdes Duarte, there were some hiccups in the beginning of this. The website went down, the phone line wasn't working. Has the city figured that out?
Yeah, so initially, the first day that they opened up those lines, they say they had issues, glitches, as they call them, for about 20 to 25 minutes, and they were able to figure it out. And within that day, they got, about 20,000 people to get their vaccination. But obviously, it's a concern because if it went down once, that doesn't make people feel very secure or feel like they can sign up the way that they would like to. Could there be problems in the future? But as of right now, they're saying, look, we've got this figured out. Let's keep on rolling. Let's keep on moving, because along the way, there's probably going to be other issues that will come up. We just have to work with what we've got.
And other mass sites in the Chicago area and across Illinois have been announced and are opening up. Rick Pearson, Johnson & Johnson gets its single-dose vaccine approved this week. How much of that will come to Chicago, and how could that speed up the vaccination process?
Well, it seems very evident that that's something that the state is looking forward to for moving forward with these mass vaccination sites. And I think, quite frankly, while there's been lots of talk that I don't know how relevant it is because it's about its efficacy. I mean, the mere fact of being able to administer one dosage rather than the two dosage of the Pfizer and Moderna just makes this process so much easier, so much streamlined, and avoids a lot of these hiccups about making sure that people who got that first dose can get the second dose, as well as that they do get the second dose.
And as vaccination ramps up, Craig Dellamore, the city goes back to 50% capacity for indoor dining. Explain the metrics that allowed the city to make this decision.
Well, it's really what Heather was saying. We have seen the test positivity rate go down, the lowest that it's been since coronavirus hit the Chicago area. And we've also seen the hospitalizations are down. Virtually everything is down. They're going in the right direction. So the restaurants and the bars, which have never been really big transmitters of these diseases or spreaders of these diseases anyway, are now able to get something closer to a livelihood, because 25%, no restaurant's business model allows that to be profitable. But 50%, that's still not profitable, but at least they can probably get by. And so they're looking forward to it. I suppose some of them are eking just above it just to get a few more people in. But this is what they've been waiting for and hoping for.
Well, let's see if some of them flout those rules and go to full capacity. I mean, it's happened in the past. Let's talk about some of the political intrigue from this week. Congresswoman Robin Kelly wins the race to replace Mike Madigan as chair of the Democratic Party of Illinois, but not without some infighting. Here's former State Senate President John Cullerton expressing concerns.
One of the biggest things the state chairman does is raise money, whether we like it or not. That's one of the things we have to do. So to be a chairman and not be able to raise money is really a limitation.
I might be limited in some ways. We'll set up guardrails, but it's not an obstacle to me being the state party chair. Plus, we said we didn't want to continue being a one-man or one-woman show.
And that was Congresswoman Kelly on our show last night. Rick Pearson, Mike Madigan ruled the Democratic Party like he ruled everything else, top down with an iron fist, but he built giant majorities for his party in this state. How will Robin Kelly run this party?
Well, I think in her own words that nobody wants a one-man party anymore after 23 years of Madigan having dictatorial control over it. The other part of this, too, is that the Democratic Party of Illinois, in all practical sense, was a fundraising arm of the Madigan machine, with its money basically going to Illinois House Democrats and Democratic candidates whose job was to ensure that he would remain in power as Speaker. Well, after these last 2 months and the decline in Madigan's power and no longer being Speaker, no longer being a House member after 50 years, and now no longer being chairman, this, to me, was a vote about decentralizing the authority within the leadership of the Democratic Party and wanting to take advantage of Democratic activists and get them more involved, those activists that were kind of spurred on by the election of Donald Trump 4 years ago.
Craig Delmore, what about former Senator Cullerton's concerns there? By law, apparently Congresswoman Kelly can't raise state and local money, so that cuts off a fundraising function that she has. Will that be a disadvantage for Democrats who are needing to raise money for the next election cycle?
I think calling it a disadvantage, maybe we're in a new day now. Money isn't raised the way it used to be, where Mike Madigan could just basically call in the unions and tell them pony up. Right now, one person isn't doing it anymore. And a lot of it is coming in online. A lot of it is coming in just differently from smaller donors. So probably not. It's going to be a wider net now, I think. And that is, frankly, that's what Congresswoman Kelly is promising, is that it is going to involve more people. Just like Rick said, this is the time to change the way the party does things, to broaden its reach downstate, and I think a lot of that is going to have to happen, but it will.
And perhaps it curbs the massive influence of public and private sector unions on the party. Lourdes Duarte, Governor Pritzker made no bones about the fact that he wanted Alderwoman Michelle Harris to get this job. He and his allies backed her. Senator Dick Durbin backed Robin Kelly. Is this a loss for Governor Pritzker, or a sign that his influence isn't that strong in the party?
Yeah, it sure looks that way. And one of the things that stood out to me is that the Latino lawmakers, when you talk about Chuy Garcia, for example, even somebody on a local level like Iris Martinez, they both and a number of other high-ranking Latinos backed Robin Kelly. And so what does that say about the future of sort of the Latino coalition and the candidates and the people that they back, how far they can go, and the leverage, the impact, the strength that they can have in the future of politics here in Illinois? So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's certainly a very important constituency base for the Democratic Party. Heather Cherone, Pritzker not only is the governor, but he's the major funder of the party right now. He's had a few losses recently. Does the Pritzker camp have to recalibrate here, especially since he's got a re-election in 2022?
I think he does. You know, it was the loss of the fair tax. It was the loss of his pick for Senate president. And this is sort of three's a trend. And us in the journalism business, they say, if you've got three examples of something, you've got a trend, so you can start writing those stories. So that's something he's got to keep his eye on as he starts looking towards reelection. I think it will also bear watching whether he is quite as generous to the Democratic Party, led by Robin Kelly, as he has been in the past. But I think Robin Kelly also, you know, warned people, elect me and we will create a fundraising base that will outlive any billionaire. Because I think they see what happened to the Republican Party in Illinois as a cautionary tale. Their finances fell off a cliff after Bruce Rauner lost the governorship and then moved to Florida. And they don't want that to happen to the Democratic Party whenever Pritzker leaves the governor's office.
And Heather, I'm sorry, that's a perfect segue to our next story here. Former Governor Bruce Rauner, who lives in Florida, got himself in the news this week for a $250,000 donation to Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis, and poof, within a few days, there was a COVID vaccination site in the enclave, the wealthy enclave that Rauner lives in the Florida Keys. Rick Pearson, is there any evidence of some kind of impropriety here?
No, there isn't. We don't even know if the former governor got a vaccination there, though he was eligible for one and had turned 65. But this was part of basically a Miami Herald story that looked at Ron DeSantis's fundraising in comparison to how certain wealthy enclaves in Florida, donors from those areas gave millions to his campaign fund. And so you had this exclusive area where former Governor Rauner basically lives now. And they got the vaccine in January at a time when vaccines were very hard to get.
Well, Rick, is that something that state or federal officials in Florida might look into, just all of those connections there?
Well, there's no evidence of, quote, quid pro quo here, but certainly, you know, when you get this vaccine and then after it's gone to this exclusive enclave, and then you have former Governor Rauner delivering a $250,000 campaign contribution to DeSantis, it certainly raises, it's very interesting optics, I would say.
Yeah, it makes you ask some questions, and I just want to piggyback off of what Rick is saying. So I spent a number of years living not there, but in an area close to there. I'm very familiar with clearly not there. I'm very familiar with the Ocean Reef Club, and I think it's safe to say that that neighborhood, that community, they have so many connections. The Bruce Rauner would not be the only connection that they have to the governor of Florida. There are so many wealthy, and when we say wealthy, it's uber wealthy, that area. And I think we still have a lot of questions with that story. We don't know, has he been vaccinated? And if he has, was it there? So I think those are all questions that probably the folks in Florida are going to have here in the coming weeks and the coming months as more information comes out about it.
Well, there's a lot of questions about the 2022 election, and another person has thrown their hat in the ring for the treasurer, Illinois treasurer. They're joining someone like a dozen candidates. Craig Dellamore, why is there such intense interest in this one job? And we're 2 years away from another election.
No, are you talking about the treasurer or the
state
secretary
treasurer
of state?
I'm sorry, the secretary of state, because former treasurer Alexi Giannoulias
yes,
that's
the confusion there.
Retiring Jesse White, Secretary of State. Yeah, why does everyone want this job so bad?
Well, you know, I think you just have to, you can just look at the numbers. I think that is the office that controls probably the most employees of any other single office in the state of Illinois, across the state. Maybe it's not exactly a patronage army, but it is a lot of people. So that is one of the reasons why it's always such a plum, and also it's going to be an open seat, finally.
For the first time in forever.
Yes, because it will not be Jesse White. So yes, this is going to be a real fight. But I think there are some front runners. Mike Hastings from Tinley Park, the state senator, threw his hat in, but you've also got the city clerk, Anna Valencia. You've also got, well,
we're looking at a list of some of the candidates, and in the past it has been a stepping stone to the governor's office. If you think of George Ryan, Jim Edgar. Let's take it local now to some city-level news. Mayor Lightfoot and Police Superintendent David Brown announced sweeping changes to the CPD search warrant policy after officers wrongly raided Anjanette Young's home. Take a look.
We are going to get this right, and we're going to make sure that people's rights are respected.
So if Ms. Young was the biggest drug kingpin, we still should have treated her with dignity and respect. That should be clear to everyone.
So new rules, extreme limits on no-knock warrants, having a female officer present for any search warrant, body cameras, and then having higher-ups in the police department execute these warrants. So Lourdes Duarte, does this fix the problem that led to the wrongful raid of Anjanette Young?
We sure hope so, right? I think a lot of people are hoping that that's enough, but I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, certainly in the next year, if we start to see other changes being done. I think she made some changes back in January, was it, of 2020, hoping that would make a difference when it comes to these warrants. And now here we go, another set of changes with, you know, the female officers going in. Also a deputy chief would have to sign off on that warrant instead of just a lieutenant. So we'll see. A lot of people are hoping that because by doing that, that's how you build trust within some of these communities where the trust is so desperately needed from the community to police. So they're hoping it works.
And Mayor Lightfoot acknowledged that she might have lost a little trust in the way that her administration handled the fallout of this, even though this did happen before her watch. Heather Sharon, does this help her a little bit politically, especially among the progressive aldermen who've been outraged at this and just really have not had a great relationship with her?
It doesn't help at all because they consider this proposal not nearly strong enough, and it came several days after 5 Black alderwomen banded together to put forward their own proposal for how the police department should handle search warrants, which was significantly tougher. So just on the example of the no-knock warrants, under Mayor Lightfoot's proposal, they would be banned unless the police department had probable cause to believe that somebody's life was at risk or there was a safety issue. Under the proposal from the alderwomen, they would be banned entirely. So that's the sort of differences you're seeing. So the question becomes, do the aldermen have enough votes, 26 votes, to push this through the city council over the mayor's objections? That's unlikely, but we also have to watch the independent monitoring team that's overseeing the reform of the police department after the Laquan McDonald scandal. They will have the final say, and the judge will have the final say on whether these reforms are adequate, and it will really be up to them to say whether it will be enough, and that is where Mayor Lightfoot will be judged ultimately.
Right, and CPD is still in the middle of this federal consent decree process. Rick Pearson, there's a story this week that didn't really get a lot of traction, but it rung my bell a little bit when it came into my inbox. Moody's, the ratings agency, basically said that Illinois' pension crisis, surprise, surprise, it's been bad. It got worse over the last year. They say about 19% more unfunded liability now than the year before. At what point does the governor and the General Assembly have to address the woefully, massively underfunded 5 pension systems in Illinois?
Well, the Moody's report, and basically Moody's does its calculation on an overall aspect versus what the state reports as what the pension liability is of roughly $150 billion instead of the $300 billion that Moody's cites. Nevertheless, we're talking a lot of money here. The bottom line, though, is that, we keep hearing all the time about there has to be pension reform, pension reform, pension reform. That was tried in this state. And the unanimous Illinois Supreme Court ruling said a person, when they're hired, is entitled to the benefits, retirement benefits, from the day that they were hired. And that is basically the Illinois Constitution is pretty ironclad on you can't diminish or impair pension benefits.
Well, that's why you've got people, including some of the editorial writers at the outlet that you work for, saying there should be a constitutional amendment, especially if the governor wants a constitutional amendment on a graduated income tax. What about that?
Well, okay, so you have a constitutional amendment to change the pension benefits. You can only change pension benefits for people going forward. You can't go back. You can't reverse. There's the contract clause of the federal Constitution that's involved here. And it says explicitly in the Illinois Constitution that contracts, or that pensions are a contract. You can't go back and reverse the contract. So if we ever tried this, we'd be in litigation for decades.
So it sounds like the only way out is
thing?
more revenue. Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
And I think we also have to remember that because this is such a difficult problem, lawmakers don't really want to deal with it. And thanks to COVID and thanks to all the turmoil of the last year, they've been able to get away with not talking about it. So maybe this will be the 2x4 upside the head that may at least get them talking about it again.
Well, you had Chris Welch mention about let's try a do-over of the graduated rate income tax and dedicate that money to pensions. I mean, the bottom line truly is, at this stage, with the legislature's hands pretty well tied, revenue is the only solution, especially when you're looking at more than 25 cents of every dollar in Illinois taxpayer sends to Springfield goes for pension benefits.
And Illinois is going to get, assuming this Biden COVID relief bill passes, Illinois stands to get about $7 billion. I mean, all lawmakers say that cannot be used for pensions, but I just wonder if you're an Illinois lawmaker, whether or not you do want to use some of that to pay down pensions, because it's clear that, especially from our discussion here, the only way out, it seems, is revenue, or at least stretching that payment period. Let's go to CPS. Lourdes Duarte, K through 5, they went back this week. The majority of parents kept their kids home. What does that tell you about where parents are at in terms of sending their kids back to school?
Well, we think the majority of parents kept their kids home, or many parents kept their kids home, but we don't have a number. That's, I think, something that we've been missing. We just did a story, just a few days ago on how CPS couldn't provide the math or the numbers that detailed how many kids actually were in attendance that day, right? I think it also tells you that there were many families and many parents that were on the side of the teachers that thought that this should have been, that the school CPS should have waited a little bit longer before getting kids back in class. And there's probably a little bit of a concern from parents who want to see how things go a week or two. They want to wait it out until they get a clear picture of how things are working within many of those classrooms.
And then next week, Heather Sharon, we're expecting kids in 5th through 8th grades to go back, and now CPS says they are negotiating with the CTU on a possible return for high school students. They say those negotiations are going well, but nothing seems to go smoothly when these two parties negotiate. Do you think we will see high school kids in class before the end of the year?
I think we're very close to just running out of time on that issue, because school ends mid-June. We're already basically at mid-March. That's just not a lot of time to create a whole new curriculum, essentially, for high schools. And the issue with high schools is, of course, that kids move around from class to class every day. So you can't really sort of group them in pods like they've done with elementary school and a little bit in middle school. It's just magnitudes harder. And I think Lourdes is right. Parents want to see what's going to happen now. This week we've seen indoor dining and indoor drinking expand. We've also seen younger kids go back to school. I will be watching those metrics very carefully, because if that's going to cause community spread, we're going to start to see it in the numbers in the next 2 weeks. And I think that a lot of parents aren't willing to take that risk, especially because kids aren't even eligible for the vaccine yet. Very few parents have gotten the vaccine yet. There's just a lot unknown at this point.
And as you mentioned, we're close to running out of time on the school year, but we have run out of time, unfortunately, for the show. So our thanks to Craig Delamore, Heather Sharon, Lourdes Duarte, and Rick Pearson. And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And Chicago Tonight Latino Voices and Black Voices are off this weekend for special pledge programming. Meanwhile, you can join us back here Monday night at 7 o'clock all next week. And the federally run mass vaccination site at the United Center opens to patients. We'll have more on that. And we'll have the latest on 6th through 8th grade CPS students returning to in-person learning. And now for the Week in Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great weekend.
Closed captioning for this program is brought to you by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.